Welcome, this is Maya Dynamics Level 2, Week 9. So, let me do my usual checkup on you guys. So, Claude, Darius, Dave, and Ingyan, no questions so far? About last week? Alright, thank you. Let's see what Claude has to say. Beautiful. Alright, cool. So, let's go ahead and roll with what I want to talk about today. So, today's going to be a little bit, I don't want to say complicated. This is a little bit tricky, a little bit different of what we've been doing so far. A bit more analyzing. It's a bit more abstract, my example of today. I'm going to begin with something a bit easier. So bear with me today, right? So that's the good thing that you have a recording that you can rewatch it. I don't know. I'm saying this because my experience with the Spanish guys, which I did this class on Tuesday in Spanish. At the end, they were a little bit cross-eyed. So I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully you guys don't have that problem. Also has to do probably with even though I'm a Venezuelan, by nationality, I don't use my Spanish too much anymore. So it takes me a lot longer to say things in Spanish, and maybe I confuse them unnecessarily, but we'll see. We'll give it a try. So bear with me if anything. So I'm sharing my screen. This is good. You already crossed. Maybe they will cross completely. You will go back to straight vision. We'll see. It's not that bad. I don't want to scare you. It's nothing, honestly. You'll see. You will laugh about it. All right, Victor's here. Beautiful. So let's go ahead and roll. So I did promise last week that we were done with fluids, but I thought there was something else missing, and you might actually like to hear about this. So one more week. This is a simple example. Okay, so this is just a 2D fluid. That's what I ended last week, probably my session. So it's just a 2D container. You could even grab the container from the presets of the visor and use the wind tunnel container. That's fine. Okay, so that's fine. I just want to show you a technique that we used on Avatar to advect foam on top of the river surfaces. I won't be able to do the entire thing because I'm missing a shader. Okay, a RenderMan shader that we have over there, or they had over there. To do the final bit, but as far as the advection of the points and the general idea, okay, I think we're reaching a level with you guys that I can just give you some sort of direction, some general idea of what an effect or a technique could do, and then from there you can take it and mutate it into something awesome. So I'm just gonna show you a little bit of our logic behind this, and this could be applied to other scenarios. All right. And this is something, if I had the spare time, I would love to explore a bit more on my own, this kind of approach, because it could be quite interesting. So hopefully some of you guys have time to experiment a little. So the challenge was, the way we were doing the water surfaces, the rivers for that matter, on that film, is that we were deforming geometry. So, but we weren't deforming it like some of you probably are on my RealFlow courses or are watching the RealFlow courses. And you heard me talk about RealWave. When RealWave, or for example, even on the Maya courses, when I teach soft bodies, I deform geometry the same way. So you will hear me say, not talking about those concepts, but basically the way that works, RealWave and soft bodies, is that we're actually deforming geometry. We're pulling and pushing CVs up and down based on either particles for the case of soft bodies or based on displacements in scripted waves for RealWave. But at the end of the day, in that scenario, you get a piece of geometry back, deformed, right? That can get really heavy for high-end productions. I'm talking about when you're working on films like that, of course, that magnitude, things are going to be playing on IMAX. The level of resolution that anything needs in order to look believable is quite high. So if you need to do a river that is relatively close to the camera, by the river, in this case, we had two kinds of rivers. We had the rivers where characters were interacting, and those were simulated differently, of course. But when you have rivers just standing there, okay, as part of the environment, just having a flow, okay, a sense of direction and a flow, we were doing those. We couldn't do them deforming geometry, okay, loading a deforming mesh, okay, it was too much for the whole scene to be able to even load and open. So the solution around that, and there's nothing new, there's nothing special there, is just to deform them using a shader. So use a displacement shader, with a bit of trickery there that the coding guys can do. Then you can replicate wave patterns and wave motion on render time. So you have a flat scene in your Maya, okay, and then you displace it in render time. So that's fine. But how do you do then? Okay, how do you do, for example, foam, right, flowing along the surface of a river like that? If the river doesn't really exist in 3D space, okay, in my 3D scene, I don't have the form river to see. So how do you push foam particles along the river to make it look foamy, right? To make it look like it has a layer of something else. That was the challenge. Okay, so the way this was solved is using something like this. So basically, what I have, like I showed you, is just a 2D container, nothing else. And I'm going using my super awesome modeling skills. I'm just going to create a whole bunch of spheres. And I'm going to move them around to replicate rocks, okay? So you can do it with more time, something nicer. But I'm just going to hit hitting Control D, and I'm going to place myself some clusters like this. Yeah, I'm just going to grab one of them, duplicate that, and let's just say that those are the rocks, the obstacles that I have on my river. So let's put one over there, one over there. Let's keep going somewhere here. We were getting something a lot nicer, of course, from the layout department, but you kind of get the idea of what I'm doing. So let's just go like this. All right, something like that, and just for the hell of it, let's do a few more here. All right, something like this. Let's say that those are the rocks of the river, and then you get your, like I said, you displace in that plane on render time, and that you will end up getting as a render a river, okay, a bunch of waves moving around. That's the way it looks on render, but we don't really have that, okay, to add vec points through it. So the way we're doing this is looking from an orthographic view, like I am right now. I'm looking for my top view. I'm going to use this container, okay, which will collide with my rocks. I'm going to use this to get a velocity field, okay. And why do I use a fluid container is because the dynamics of it are very similar to what will happen in liquid, especially in a 2D container like this. You will see why. So because I'm going to collide the fluid with the spheres, I don't really want to collide one by one, so I'm going to grab all my spheres and I'm going to combine them. Just all the ones I have here. That's just my choice. Okay, you can do what you want. But basically, if I combine them, it's a lot easier. Just for the sake of speed, I'm going to delete their history, do the usual cleanup, freeze transformations. So you get a whole bunch of spheres, just one clump, right? It's easier. So I'm going to grab my fluid. Before I make it collide, I'm going to just play it back. This is just a 2D fluid with the volume emitter at the bottom. I'm going to check. You're the masters of fluids by now, so I don't have to explain anything about that anymore. But basically, I'm going to show you as when it renders, and the resolution is high because I'm only using, it's a 2D fluid, so you can get away with a lot more, right? Of course. So let's go ahead and run it. So you can see that is my density. I don't know if I'm going to have enough frames to see it, but that's my density, and let's let it play. Dynamics of the fluid itself, okay, they take over. So you have buoyancy, you know everything. So you have buoyancy, they have swirl, they have all that stuff. So what I want to do is have a lot of density flow along. I'm getting something here that I think I cached. Yeah, this fluid is cached. How do I know it's cached? I'm reusing a scene from another class, right? But I know it's cached because I can see the places where the previous rocks used to be. So this means that I can go in and scrub this probably. Yeah. So that's not going to help me on this one. I'm going to delete the cache that is connected to this fluid first of all, so we can do it together. So let's just go into dynamics, fluid and cache, and then let's say delete cache. Let's just get rid of that. Now I can simulate this guy. Let's see how fast it goes. If it's too slow, nah, it's fine. It's good. All right, so let's let it run a little. Okay, this is going. I could force it. I can output more density and all, but let's let it move on its own, so you can kind of see what's doing. Okay, it's not very river-like, but eventually, if you output enough density, then you will start getting a bigger sense of flow. You can increase your buoyancy. You can do all that stuff. This fluid is not for rendering. We're just going to use it as a force field. So if I look at my velocity draw, this is what's worth the money. So I'm not gonna look at the density at all. I'm gonna turn that off, and I'm gonna stick to this. Okay, so you can kind of get a current pattern going on in here. Right now, there's no obstacles involved, so I'm not including this yet. But you can kind of see that if this was a river, looking at it from the top, then you can kind of see a current of water, let's say, moving around. I'm going to include then the rocks, just by selecting those two things, and I haven't made collide with anything in this course yet because I don't like it, but in this case it does work with fluids. So I'm going to go in and go to fluid effects, and you're going to say make collide. There's nothing in the options, just the tessellation, that's it. So you hit apply and you get a collision. So run that one more time. Remember, we're visualizing the velocity, okay? So right now you don't get anything yet. Yeah, those little dots are fine, that's normal, but what you're looking for is eventually the arrows. So you let this run for a little bit. It's independent of the length of your shot. You will probably run the river. Let's say that it's one river that is looped. You can see it from many angles and different sequences. Being a landmark like that, of course, the river is not going to move around. So you could simulate it, the velocity field for that river for, I don't know, 3,000 frames or something, and then just reuse it in all the shots you need. So you let this run, okay, for a few frames. I probably will increase my my amount of density coming through, but you can kind of start to see what's happening in here. So you can see how the flow of water, okay, let me just get closer. This is what I love. So the flow of water comes from one side, it finds the obstacle, it's trying to find a way around it, but then due to the dynamics of the fluid itself, you can see this kind of swirling motion in here. And you can see that the velocity behind the rock, the flow comes from the bottom. The flow behind the rock is less, so the amount of motion is less. This means that if you're advecting particles, just look at this pattern here. If you're advecting particles through this, you will get them to move around like that, and they're gonna get caught up into this swirl, and they kind of get stuck down here. And that's what actually happens in the river. If you pay attention, you see the rocks. They will have a bit of foamy. Patches and stuff getting stuck in those rocks, and they just hang there and then eventually fade out. So and this is happening, this pattern, okay, of turbulence, let's say, of movement, this field, okay, that's what we're going to be using it as. It's impossible to get any other way with this amount of detail, okay. I will, just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to double the density. You know how to control this fluid already. You know if you want to make it flow faster or slower. You know how to do all these things. So there's not much need on that. I'm just going to let it run with a bit more density. And then you can do what I was doing on my scene. You can just go in once you're happy with it. Just cache it. And this is something I'm going to film like that. Okay, you will come up with the default values for your river motion, right? So values of buoyancy and all that kind of stuff, swirl. And then you could easily run all the rivers in one shot, get your velocity field ready, and then it's just at vecting points. So I'm going to let this run a little bit. I should probably, I should be caching this thing. But it's not really needed. It moves 7 frames per second. That's not bad at all. I'm going to let it run on its own. So here we go. You can let it move a bit more. The more resolution you put, the more intricate the flow is going to be, the more, the nicer the pattern will be. Okay, so you can see areas of slow. This is what I like. You see the water finds its way through, and it picks up speed over here. You get a little swirling motion here, but here is a bit slower because it has a couple of obstacles in the way. This water will probably go in here and speed up. Okay, this is a very nice pattern. So I'm gonna let it run a few more frames. You can kind of see what I mean. Perfect. And then with that, once you're happy with this, okay, we play with the values a little bit, then let's advect some particles through. That's what we were doing. So I'm going to make just an emitter. I'm going to rewind, okay, to the first frame, and I'm going to make that emitter, I'm going to place it at the bottom and scale it, So let's go in here. This we have done already together, so nothing special here. So I'm going to look at it from the side. You can see that this is a 2D container, but I'm giving it depth. Okay, so I'm giving it at least 1 unit of that. That's just because it's valid, okay, to do that. Just basically even though it's calculated in 2 dimensions, even if it has depth, it just basically those vectors are affecting the exact same way along the height of the container. So it allows me to do something like, I can have a container that has a bit of thickness. That's completely fine. All right, so I'm going to grab these particles here, which you can go in and rename them foam if you want, and connect them to this fluid container. And I'm going to take out their conserve. So they will only move if they're being pushed by the field, okay, by the fluid. So you can do the expression that we did last week. Oh no, actually we're going to do it in the next example, I think. Where you kill particles if they stop moving. Based on velocity, you can kill them. I'm going to show you that next. So now I got my particles in here. Let's go ahead and run them. If you catch the fluid, of course, it's going to be faster. So it's up to you. I don't want to run it twice, so I'm just going to push it through. So these particles, okay, as you can see at the bottom, they're going to start moving, and you already saw what the fluid looks like. So I'm going to disable the velocity display so you can focus on the particles. So velocity drop. There we go. So that's gone. And you think of those guys as your foam. So let them play. In the beginning of the fluid, all the fluids are a bit funky. So let it play a little bit. Let it catch some speed and get some density moving. You could even use surface emitter if you want, and if you don't want to push only from the bottom, right? But get them moving through. And now eventually, once it starts to get speed, play blast this thing, okay, and this will feel like it's water. It's unbelievable, right? So that's how you get the particles being advected by the river, okay, that it has this kind of obstacles on its way, okay. So you get very quickly, you can kind of see I could make them streaks. Let me see if I can get those questions going. If you have them, start typing them, so when I jump back into Adobe Connect, I can see them quickly. But there you go. This is probably a better way to display this. So it's beautiful, man. Whatever you saw on the fluid, you can see it here. You can even see the swirling motion happening in here, okay? So this is the heart and soul of that effect. The part that I'm missing, that I told you that I cannot complete the full effect in here because I don't have that, is that the shader that we're using for rendering those waves, for displacing that geometry, was capable of taking these particles in here. And that's something that I can do. That's what I'm thinking of. If I have some time, I'm going to do it at home. But basically, the shader was taking these particles in here, and he was using their code to go ahead and place the particle on the nearest point on the surface of the river. So the shader knows how it's going to displace the river, and he's going to take this particle cache that I gave them, and he's going to take the position in y, the translation in y of that particle, and he's going to match it to the closest point on the surface of the river. And the closest point on surface is a node that exists in Maya. So if you guys want to go in and venture on your own, that's what I wanted to try myself, is using the closest point on surface. I could probably take a real wave mesh or something like that and use that, and it will be very, very slow, but I don't care if it looks good and it takes a few hours, I don't mind. Using the closest point on surface, I could grab and plug that to the position in y of these particles. You can snap them to be sitting on top of that river all the time. It's something that is worth checking. So that's what the shader was doing. But basically, we were running just this. So we were doing our fluids, we're doing our particle path with lots of points, and then plugging that cache to the shader. The shader was modifying the position in y to make it sit on top of the river. So I think it's a bit of an outside the box thinking. I like to show you guys sometimes. How you can just do something as simple as a 2D fluid container to do something as complicated as this. So let's see if you guys have questions about this first part. Anything? Everything clear? You guys like it? I think it's pretty cool. Especially the speed that it calculates. Such a complicated field, it will be interesting. The camera shot will be from the top. Well, that's the thing. You will render a height pass. I'll tell you more steps, right? So we were rendering from the top just to get a height map from the river that was being displaced. So the same shader could, you render from the top. It gives you a height map, which is basically an image It's like almost like a sea depth looking from the top, right? The same thing. And then he was using that information to place the particles on top. That's how you know if the river, where the river sits in space, based on the height. So we were simulating, we were rendering a path from the top view and plugging that into the shader along with the particle path, and based on that information, he was taking the height of the river, the position of the particle, and putting the particle on top. And then you render your shot from the shot camera. You render your particles, from whatever view your camera wants to look. But because the positioning of the particle is being done by the height of the river, then that's why the particles were sitting correctly. And this can be done, like I said, if you do it in Maya using the closest points on surface node, you don't have to probably do anything with the orthographic view at all. Because basically the closest point on surface will need an input, which will be the surface, right? The real. I'm thinking real way because I don't know, I'm doing real flow courses, but anything you want. It will need an input that is that surface, and you will need something else to place it in return. So you feed the particles positions, and feed the surface, and it will be slow, okay, but it could work. I'm gonna give it a try, but if you guys try it first, I would love to see, and I can help you if you get stuck. So that's that part. So any question? No, I don't see any questions here, so I'm assuming it's clear. Like I said, this is just an idea, right, to send you your way to do something better. But okay, so let's see. Ingion is typing something. No questions so far. Beautiful, thank you. All right, so I'm going to move to the next one, the next example. So this is awesome, man. I love the pattern, man, how complicated this is. Beautiful. All right, so I'm going to show you the next thing, which is going to be. One second, bear with me 1 minute. I'm going to locate this file first. Basically, I'm going to show you how to query fluid voxel information and pass that on to particles, and use that for whatever you want. But there you go, particles to fluid start. There you go. You'll see in a minute. This technique, okay, I used it on we're doing some testing for a big superhero film. I cannot say, but basically we needed to illuminate, kind of like light up skin from within, right? Let's say that you as a human, you have superpowers, and you get very hot inside, and you can see through your skin how hot it is. You can see the veins flowing almost like lava, like fire inside of you, kind of thing, through your skin. So we're doing some testing about that, and I came up with this. I'm not saying I invented this by all means, okay, but I did it myself, so I don't know. Someone else did it before me, I'm sure. But basically, I was running in that particular case. I was running almost like a fire, like the same fire pretty much that we did together here. Let's say, running that simulation inside the skin of a character. So I had a human, 3D human model in Maya, right, with animation, matching a live action play that someone shot with an actor, right, for the testing. So this actor was looking at his hand, okay, rotating his hand in front of his face. To eventually, we're gonna do the effect of his arm. You can see through his skin how, you know, the flow of like fire or whatever was running inside of him. But for more of a biological look, he had the 3D model had bones, and he had nervous system, and he had veins. So it was a very detailed model. But we needed to see that kind of effect. So basically, what I did is I ran a fluid simulation of fire inside his skin. So it was colliding with the object. So it was almost like you were containing a fire inside a human model. And that gave me, the idea was, okay, the lighter, once you have these big meetings and dailies and all this conversation with a bunch of smart people, then they came up with this solution where we were going to use the effects only to help the lighting department, because there was a lot of scattering involved. Okay, you have a human skin, and you needed to see through that temperature and that flow. Okay, so rendering the fluid itself wouldn't really help much. Okay, the compositing department wouldn't have enough. I don't know. We're having issues blending a fluid simulation on top of the skin and see it through. It was a bit complicated. You couldn't really ray trace a fluid through the skin. Okay, there was a lot of issues going on there. So the idea was at the end, well, why don't we do a particle pass? Okay, that has the properties of that fluid. that we can use in RenderMan as lights, because RenderMan has that ability, and I'm sure other engines as well, but in that case was RenderMan. So RenderMan has the ability to take particle systems and take attributes from the particles and use them as light sources or whatever you want, color or whatever you want. So the challenge was that. How do I run then my beautiful fluid sim that no one got to see and no one got to render? How do I pass that on to particles so the lighters can use that and scatter light from inside, okay, the skin out? And that's how that was achieved. So that's the introduction of the reasoning why. And you will find a million other applications, and I can't wait to see what you can do. So I'm just going to show you what I will do. So what I have here in front of you is the fire container that we did together on week 6, if I'm not mistaken. It's just lower resolution, a quarter of what I did with you guys. If I'm smart enough, I would have cached it, and yep, looks like it is. Let me double check that, all right? Let me just let me just visualize this fluid. If you have any questions about what I was trying to explain, the reasoning why I did this, please type them, and I'm going to check on that in a minute. So here's my, you can probably recognize the container. And if I'm not mistaken, beautiful, it's cached. Not a super high res, okay, because I need to work quickly with you. So, but there it is. So let's say that this is my example, what I was trying to explain. So let's say that this is happening inside the skin and blah, blah, all the stuff that I explained to you. How do I do that then? First thing is I'm gonna advect some particles through this container. So I'm gonna make an emitter. And I'm gonna just basically, pretty much like we did with the river, right? So you match it. Let's just do it a bit better. I'm confused. Okay, so sorry, I got lost where I am. Side view, maybe. All right, so let me just place this guy where it's supposed to be. I wish I could show you that scene file. It was awesome. From that testing that we did. I probably have recreated one day at home because it's quite interesting. Now that I'm doing all those case studies, I'm very always try to remember what we did on films and how we did things, and probably I'll try something like that. Sadly, I cannot tell you which superhero it is, but he's very rich and he can fly, so you'll see why. All right, cool. So I got my particles in here, and there you go. So I'm going to take these particles and I'm going to do the usual. I'm going to take the conserve out and I'm going to connect them to the fluid as a field. Okay, so there you go. Perfect. So this is going to work fine. Okay, these particles are going to move. Let me just rewind this. Well, I don't need to show you the fluid, and that's heavy on my computer, so I'm going to put that to off. And let's just focus on the particles. So here they go. Let me go like that. The problem here, okay, so far has been that when those particles, because they have the conserve set to 0, when they exit the container, they will just stop on their tracks. And that hasn't been a problem so far, but right now it's going to be. Because I'm going to need a lot of particles, and these guys are just, just staying there doing nothing. And if you think about it, if you're going to end up using this as source of light, you don't really want that. I don't know. I don't think you would want to have all this accumulation of particles. Basically, what I want to do is tell the particles to die if they exit this box. Okay, so that's one thing I think is just more housekeeping than anything. It's very easy to do. You just grab the particles, make them lifespan PP, and if I tell you kill them when they exit the box, that concept is a bit more complicated. But because I know that what it means if they exit the box. If they exit the box, it means the particle stops. If the particle stops, the velocity is 0. So that is easy. I can just go in and say if the velocity is 0, then just die. That's as easy as it goes, right? So that's what I wanted to also say, like, don't overcomplicate things. I know it's more challenging, and if some of you use Houdini or you have that Houdini kind of mindset. You guys like to complicate things way too much. So try to think simple. So doing based on, I will hear that, I will love it. I love it when the younger guys do that. They go in, but I want to do the bounding box, and they calculate the box dimensions, and if they exit, check the position of the particle against the bounding box, and if it's not the same, I don't know. They go on like off the tangent, like spent 2 days doing this. And if you know this rule, the particle axis, the velocity is, they stop and the velocity is 0. It takes 2 seconds to do. So please, just by all means, try to work simple. Simple doesn't mean you're stupid. Simple doesn't mean your technique is not as, advanced for the technology of 2013 as it should be. I actually appreciate it more, people that work in the simple way, than go into crazy. I could have shown you how to do it based on the volume, but there's not really a need for that. So you can say if, just organize my desk. If the velocity, well, first of all, this will work if you calculate the magnitude of the velocity. That's one thing that is better to do it in advance. So you can just say float, color, whatever you want, and just say that is the magnitude of the velocity of the particles. That's easy enough. And then you can say if that value, if $val, I named it. If $val is equal to 0, or you could, less than 0 wouldn't exist. So that's not really a need. So you could, but if you want to, just for the hell of it, just put that less or equal than 0, then you kill the particles. So come on, man, I need to do this one. All right, so lifespan pp is equal to 0. That's how they die. And you also always have to say, what happens if not, right? Especially on creation. So you can just say else, and then give them a lifespan. Give them enough life for them to complete their journey, whatever they're doing. In my example, the stuff that I was doing for that show, the particles were flowing along his arm. So in that case, you have to keep that in mind, right? Give them enough time to reach the fingers or whatever. So hit create. There's no mistakes in here. This thing's fine. And you need to evaluate this, of course, on creation and in runtime. Now, if you do this on creation, it's completely valid, right? It's fine as an idea, is okay. I just think you probably end up having less particles. Like if you think about this, when these particles are born, they're going to start getting the influence of the fluid. But they might be born in an area where there's no fluid because we're doing the fire. The fire has holes in it and have gaps and stuff. So doing it on create, killing them right away, unless you know that these particles are born outside the box for some reason, and they shouldn't. But if you're emitting them outside the box, and for some weird reason you have to check on creation if they are moving or not, then do it. But if you're gonna do it like I'm doing it here, I'm not gonna do it on creation. On creation, I'm just gonna give them life, and then I'm gonna check on runtime. I'm gonna give them enough time to pick up speed, in case someone is born in an area where there's not much fluid in there, and then they're gonna start moving later, because I know they're all born inside. So that's just my preference. Okay, so I'm gonna go on creation, and I'm gonna get rid of all this, and I'm just gonna leave the lifespan that I'm giving them. And also, I don't want to give them, give them again a lifespan on runtime, right? You don't want to save this again. So you basically on runtime, you're only checking if they're, misbehaving and then killing them. So this is the correct way. So on creation, I'm going to give them life, and then in runtime, I'm going to check when they go outside this rule, and then kill them. It's simple enough. That's just going to keep your scene moving at a decent speed, no waste. So let these guys run. There's no accumulation of particles, which is good. Okay, so that's fine. This will allow me to increase my my rate. I'm looking at the wrong thing. I'm sorry. This is the emitter. Okay, so let's try a bit more particles, because it's going to make more sense the more particles I have. You can see that the more particles you have, the more it's going to look like the fire. And eventually you will get the same kind of resolution. But this is enough. So what I need to do then, my challenge is, I already explained it to you. So basically, how do I do this? How do I query that information? Basically, the approach is you need to find where the particle is located, first of all. Okay, there's a few things you need to be checking on a per particle basis, by the way. If this particle inside or outside the box. I already solved that problem by killing them. But anyway, on my calculation, I have to make sure that is included. So I have to make sure, are you inside or outside the container? If you're inside, then what is the name of the voxel where you are? That's the second thing. And based on that, then you're going to ask Well, what is the value of density, for example? What is the value of heat, temperature? Or what is your value of fuel? And then the particle is the one making the question. And then you can say, oh, okay, I'm going to use that for the particle's X attribute, whatever, right? That is the thought, okay? Before I venture into that, I want to make sure that you guys are with me here. Claude is going to have to watch it again 20 times, but I think, okay, well, that's good. It's not the Fantastic Four, the Human Torch. No, he's not that rich, man. He's a real rich guy. I'll leave it there. A really billionaire looking guy. All right, cool. So, beautiful. Right. It's I don't see any questions so far, but keep typing. Don't wait for me to come in and ask. So those are the questions. Are you inside the container? If you are, what's the name of the voxel you're in? And then what is the name, query, an attribute of that container? Anything. Not anything, but density, temperature, fuel for sure you can query, or velocity as well. So let's do that. So what I'll do is I can go right in pretty much into my creation expression. And let me make this a little bigger. And I'm going to open the Maya documentation to give you a hand with this, to show you how you can just, between the recording that I have for you and this, it'll be very easy to do. So if you open the technical documentation, this is going to help you. This is massive. Let me just lower the, there you go. All right, so between these two things, we're going to get the help we need. So to query something from a fluid, there is a command called the get fluid attribute. Okay, so you can say get fluid AT, and then here it is. So get fluid attribute allows you to query, and then there is another one called set fluid attribute, which you can actually that's how we were doing fluid emission out of particles back in the day before they enabled it automatically. But that's a different topic. Get fluid attribute, if you go in, you can read a little bit what it does. You can see the flags that you need to keep in mind when you're asking for things. This is just a query mode, that's all. Okay, this command is just for asking things. So, and the best part that was, priceless is just examples, okay, that you can use. So here you can see how you can ask a container for a velocity value, how you can ask for density, okay, on a per voxel basis even. That's what we're going to be using. So if you analyze one of these examples, you can get the density of the entire container, which is not really what I want. I want to do it on a per voxel basis because each particle will be in a different voxel, right? These voxels have an ID. Yeah, they do have a name. So that is one way to go. But basically you can see in the second line, it says, how do I get the density of the cell? They call cells as voxels, okay? Of cell, for example, with this coordinates is 1, 2, and 3. Okay, that's the name, let's say the coordinates of that voxel. And then basically this is the command, right? So you're going to get the fluid attribute -AT for the attribute name, okay, between quotes, and then you have to specify the coordinates of that voxel. You can see that it's -XI, YI, and ZI. So this is what we're going to be using. Now, what am I going to use for this? For the X, Y, and Z is going to be the position of the particle. That's it. Honestly, that's as complicated as it gets. That's all, honestly. So, simple. How do I do this? Well, let's start with, let's go ahead and get the velocity of the particles, okay? That's one thing we should do. So you can basically type, okay, let's make a vector. And the velocity of the particles is an attribute that already exists, okay? And I don't really have to do this bit if I just want to query the velocity. But if I want to access each individual channel of that vector, okay, if the individual component of that vector, I will have to put it into a variable that I can strip it out. Same thing I told the Spanish guys. My last 3 classes of level 3, the master class, are mail scripting classes. So by all means, that begins next week. So starting next Saturday for 3 weeks, I'm going to be doing mail scripting with them, and you're welcome to watch those recordings plus this one, and everything will be fine. Okay, so don't worry about that. But for now, I'm going to make a vector, and I'm going to call it whatever. I'm going to call it my velocity, my vel. Right? Just an anecdote here. Try to use names like that. Okay, something a bit more. This another TD will pick it up, and he will understand it probably. I have friends of mine that they're fantastic with their names. Okay, their vector, my shit, or vector, I hate my job. of dollar fuck this, and is you know, is funny, but then how do you find your way through a script is terrible, right? So try to be friendly to your coworkers. So vector.myVal is easier. So then that's going to be just equal to the, sorry, I don't need the velocity. Sorry, I'm just complicated. I need the position of the particles, not the velocity. I don't care for that. I was telling you how the particle needs to check which voxel is in. So it's the position that I need. So I'm going to say this is equal the position. That's it. So this will return a vector, which, you know, 3 values that will correspond to x, y, and z positions of this. And then this is on a per particle basis. Then the next step is easy. You can just go get fluid attribute dash AT for the attribute that I need. Well, you know, sorry, I'm complicating things. First, I need to know the name of the voxel, and I don't know that yet. So that's a different thing. I'm sorry, that's why I probably complicate things more, because I make this kind of deviations. This get fluid attribute we're going to use it in a second, and that's perfectly fine. I was just skipping one step. Check this one out. Fluid voxel info. Okay, the name says it all. Okay, so this is the guy who's going to give me the name of the voxel. Sorry about that. Okay, so this one here, okay, if I scroll down, provides the basic information about the mapping of a fluid voxel grid. So there you go. So basically here I can go in and check a few things. You remember I was saying at the beginning that there was a few questions. Is the particle inside the voxel? Sorry, the container. Yes. All right, what's the name of your voxel? That's the second question. This guy was the one who's going to return that information about the voxels of a fluid container, right? So this is the first thing actually I need to run. So this is fine. The position I'm going to need it. And the next one is going to be using, they have examples on every command down here. Okay. So what I will do is, you know, you can read a bit more about this, but once I give you the command, then you can go in and check this Maya help and read a bit more about each flag if you want to. But the ones that you need to care for especially is this one, check bounds. Check bounds will tell you if it's inside or outside a container. And you can kind of see if a point is out of bounds meaning outside of a box, of a container, I'm sorry. So this is the one responsible for that particular question. So what I'm going to say is fluid voxel info. Did I type it correctly? Yes, fluid voxel info. And then I'm going to say that CB for check bounds, okay? So basically that one here, it's just going to tell me yes or no. And just by putting the flag, it's already checking, all right? So if you don't say anything, okay, if you don't tell them yes or no, it just automatically assumes that, you know, you're wondering if it is inside, right? So it's like a true, it's a boolean, right? So you have to only check if I say false, and I don't care if it's inside, right? So in this case, then you're going to check for the bounds of this, and then I need the voxel, okay? And that's what's going to give me the voxel. And the voxel is basically, I need 3 positions. If you go into the help down here, probably you will see it. Let's see if it's somewhere here. Full voxel input inbounds. Well, these numbers, okay, this 990, for example, this 880, these are the positions, coordinates, right? So I need to check against the particles. So what I'm going to say is simple. I'm going to take this variable, okay, and I'm going to paste it in here, and I'm going to say 0. Okay, let's go ahead and say 1 and say 2. There you go. So what am I saying here? Well, I'm going to say fluid, you know, I'm going to check for the voxel information if it's inside or not based on this 3 positions. Okay, that's it. So you're basically going to take the position of a particle in X, Y, and Z, and you're going to check it against this container to see if it's inside or outside. But what happens here? I don't know what the name of the container is. I need to specify the name of the container. You can see it on the examples at the end. They have the name of the container. Like I said, you can read this with more time and you know, see more. But I know that my container is called fire shape 1. Why? Because it's right here in my outline. Fire 1, you have to put the shape node behind. If you don't remember, you can just go back in there and find it and get the name. So here you go. So this command is going to tell me if the particle is inside or outside, and the coordinates of that voxel. Okay. What happens is if I run this like that, that's fine and dandy, but I don't have a way to store that information, and I want to store it to use it later to get the fluid attribute. Basically, this takes care of the first part of the problem, is the particle inside and what is the name of the voxel you are. But then I need to go and ask, and that's what this one is going to do. So basically, I need to be able to store this information somewhere. So what I'll do here is save an integer. Okay, I'm going to make, for example, an integer, and I'm going to call it $vox for voxel. And I'm going to say that that's equal to this command. Okay, but this on its own is not going to work. Like this is not going to work because I need to be able to, if I leave it like this, Maya is going to think that this is just some string, some text that you want to save. It doesn't really understand that this is a command that you're supposed to evaluate first. So what you do is you put it in between these tilde signs, right there, all right? And if you put it between the tilde signs, it means that this will get evaluated first, and the result of that is going to get assigned here, all right? So that is the first step, okay? And this will return an array of numbers, but it's just yeah, you will see now in the list. So perfect. Now once I have that, okay, now I'm going to get the fluid attribute. Now it's going to be fine. So let's say that in that example, I wanted to get the temperature value, okay? So I'm going to do the same here. So I'm going to get a fluid attribute, and the attribute I need is temperature. It has to be placed in between quotes, right? That's important. Okay, it's a string, and it needs to read it this way, and that is documented. Now I can go back to my, how do I go back if they don't have a, let me go back again. Oh hell, go to hell. I'm gonna just do it here. Get fluid, there you go. Okay, so now I'm back on track in here. So basically, on the description, at the bottom, the examples, you can see that the attributes are placed in between quotes. Okay, so that's the part you need. So I'm going to get a fluid attribute, the temperature, and you can see that based on the example, then I need to specify which voxel I want. And now I know the voxel because the particle is giving me, this is returning the voxel name. Okay, so all you need to do in this case is following the example. You go xi, I'm going to do like this, xi.yi.zi, okay, and then here we're going to have to plug 3 numbers, okay, so position in x, y, and z of that voxel, which comes from here. So I'm going to grab this guy, and I'm going to paste it in here, and this is going to be position 0. So the first item is x, this is for y in 1, and this is for z, which is 2. Alright, so now I know the name of the voxel where this particle is located in that particular frame, and I'm going to be asking what is the temperature. Now what happens, you can ask, again the same problem as before, you can ask and then great, you'll get an answer, but you need to remember that answer, you need to store it in order to be able to use it for something. So you need to do the same thing here. So I'm going to make here, for example, a float, and I'm going to name this $, for example, temp, for temperature. And why do I do this? You will wonder probably. Why do I put this next to the variable name? If you're not expecting, I'm expecting a value of temperature. The value of temperature is just a float, right? It's not a vector, right? It doesn't have 3 components. Temperature is a number. Why do I make an array? Those of you with a bit more experience, this is an array, right? This basically means that this variable is expecting a list of numbers. If that's not the case, it's just because if I need to evaluate a command first by doing this thing again, I put in the tilde signs at the beginning and the end. Okay, if you know why I'm doing this, then you probably know the answer already. But if I need to put the tilde signs in there to evaluate the command first, Maya always needs to be an array. That's just the way my Mel is. That's all. If you don't put it, Maya will complain and tell you. So I'm just saving you the trouble. So just do this first. And at the end of the day, you're going to get a list of 1 item, which is fine. Doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Excuse me. Okay, so now I have in memory, on a per particle basis, every frame. Okay, we're going to have to put this on runtime. The value of temperature of the voxel where the particle lives. Sorry, I got some water to clear my voice. So, perfect. So what do I do with that? Well, we'll see now. I hit edit and I did make a mistake, so perfectly. My position is not an array, so Yeah, of course, I made a mistake in here. Well, actually, let me just double check that. Oh, of course, yeah, that's my mistake. Okay, so basically here, I'm declaring a vector, okay? And I'm treating that vector in this expression wrong. It's not like this. It's basically when you make a vector, I'm extracting each component. So basically, it shouldn't be like this. Because it's true, it's not an array. You can see this is an array. An array has items in between brackets to represent that. But basically, what you should set here is what's this. It was that x, that y, and that's it. That's it. That y, and that's it. Not all the time the error messages are so clear. This one tells me exactly what I need to know, but where my mistake is. But basically, this is fine. So now I have a syntax somewhere. Let's double check this. But these guys have to be in parentheses. So let me just quickly do this. Okay, and the name of the container is correctly Fireshape1. Let's try one more time. And the problem is solved, okay? So that was my mistake, but I do welcome those in class because that way you don't have to do them later. So perfect. So this expression is working, and I'm going to end up in memory with something called $temp that has the extraction of the value of temperature over a specific voxel where the particle lives. Now, this has to be applied in both runtime and creation. So let me just put everything close. It's only 3 lines of code if you think about it. It's nothing. So copy this, paste it in runtime. Just after you do your lifetime thing, paste it right there. Fine. And what do I do with this? Okay, now I have that information in memory. I should be assigning this to a attribute on the particle. So I'm going to make a per particle attribute. Call it whatever you want. I'm going to make a float per particle. Name that, for example, temperature pp per particle. Hit OK. And that is an attribute that you know it will be listed in there. And now I can just go in and extract that, okay, and assign it, for example, to that value. So I can just say that temperature pp is equal to $temp0. That in this case is the only item that I have. So remember, this list has only one item, and the first item of an array is 0. I'll explain that better in my next course. But when you have a list of items, you can see here that I always put 0, 1, and 2 to represent the first item of the list, the second, and the third. So this being a list of one item, item 0 is the only one I can use. So now the particles will have a per particle attribute called temperature 0. That's the extraction has been done completely. So now I query that, I get that out of the container and paste it on the particles. So let me give myself some room in here. Paste that on creation. Has to be done on both, of course. And now I have an attribute on these particles that I could query. So let me go ahead and run it. You will slow down a little your simulation, but not too much. So basically, these particles are doing all those checks, automatic. Every frame they're running through. And now I can go in and change my particles, for example, to numeric, which I always make that mistake. I should have done that on the first frame when there's no particles visible. So try to remember that. It's just because it's trying to show me by default all the particles at once. So let me just rewind. Current render type. And then I'm going to do selected only, and I'm going to ask them for the value of temperature pp. You know that numeric will display any attribute you ask for. So right now it's going to display on the selected particles, which I have none. I'm going to let them run a little bit. It's going to, if I pick a particle, let's just grab any. This value is 0, 0, so there's something off. Let's see what's going on in here. Nothing. Did I type it correctly? Temperature pp, nothing, nothing. Okay, so there's something broken, right? Because definitely on the expression, we're going to double check that right now. Because the attribute, the temperature attributes are not 0. It shouldn't be. So let's go in and check it. Okay, so let me just take a look in there. Make this a little bigger so you can help me out. Okay, I got the error already. I figured it out. And it's actually also good that it happened right now. So the command that is getting the attribute, okay, if I believe I closed the help in Maya, but basically the get fluid attribute, the same thing as the fluid voxel info, it needs these flags, but also needs to know the name of the container that you're assigning to. If I were to run this command on its own, okay, meaning copying this and pasting it down here and run it, I'm going to get a syntax error because I'm missing the name of the container. And this is something you should be always very careful with. If you set the tilde like I did here, okay, to evaluate this command first, it means that Maya is not really going to check for any syntax in here until you start evaluating the particles. So you will put your expression, you will hit edit, and everything will go through. But if you have any mistakes in here, Maya's not going to check them. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind. So what I'm missing, Maya doesn't really know. Okay, I know the voxel, but voxels of which container? So you have to say fire shape 1. That should fix the problem. Copy this and paste it on runtime. And I think I'm missing also, you can see I'm not assigning the color, the temperature on runtime, so I need to do that too. For some reason I didn't do it. So those two things were missing, so paste that in there. Now we should be in better shape. You see it went from, so it is working. So, and because this is being evaluated on runtime, I can go 1 frame forward and I will get values, hopefully. Yeah, so you can see the 0.02, 0.13, okay, 0. This shows that it's working. 0.057. These are remember there are values of temperature. So obviously the higher, closer to the base, it will be hotter, right? This fire tends to dissipate towards the top, so you probably end up with hotter. You see 0.083. If you go to the very base of the emitter, okay, it'll be hotter probably. Okay, a bit gas, 0.09. So this is good to do. It's nothing exciting, but I know what it could do. So for me, it's just numbers, right? But what these numbers actually represent is what's important. If you want to visualize it, okay, I will recommend you to go into the color and make yourself a per particle RGB. Okay, so load that in there, and I'm gonna make myself a ramp, but I'm gonna go to the options first. By default, ramps are driven by the age of the particle, as you can see right here. But you can drive a ramp based on other attributes. So I can drive this ramp based on temperature pp. This is the best way to visualize this. So I know because I set them to numeric, I know that there are numbers. And I know that they range between, for example, 0.09, let's say 0.1 and 0, I'm guessing, right? So 0 and 0.1 seems to be the values that we're ranging here. Just keep that in mind for later. So I'm going to put my particles back to points. And going back in the object mode, and I'm going to rewind and play again. And I'm going to go to shaded mode. And you start getting this. Okay, let me just play this back. And probably I'm going to put a bit more particles just to see it a little better. So there are colors, and these colors are not random. That's the whole point I'm trying to stress in here. These colors are there for a very important reason, a very particular reason. They're extracting your fluid information, and they're adopting color based on that. So now, okay, based on this, you can go into your particles and play with that ramp. You know that ramp is being driven by temperature. So I could go in, for example, first edit my array mapper, because I told you that the values of velocity, the temperature range between 0 and 0.1. Right now my ramp, it ranges between 0 and 1. So it's a bit off, So if I just do 0.1, then this ramp is a bit better mapped to the values of the, let's see what we get here. It's more precise, but I can see that I'm not really getting much. The information is there, but it's not really visible. So never mind. This is a better mapping, but I'm gonna have to increase the values so much that it's not gonna to be able to see the colors. I'm gonna leave it as it was, and then go back to the ramp, and then just tweak it there. So let me let it run a little bit, and go back to the particles, grab them there, and edit this ramp, and look at this ramp, and this ramp now see it in terms of cool versus hot, because the default behavior was age, so it was like from birth to death, so it tends to climb up, right? So basically that's what's happening in here. So now you can go ahead and take this ramp. If you wanted to make it just like the fire you have, then you can match this ramp to the incandescent ramp of the fluid, for example, if you want it, and make it look like that. Or you can do whatever you want as far as color goes. But now you know that the transition of this color is based on the transition of the temperature of a physically correct fluid simulation. That's what I'm trying to say. That's how I did my stuff. So I basically gave the lighter a cache of my particles, and he used that attribute temperature pp. He used that attribute as the intensity of his light. And he could have used a variation of my RGB pp, which I have right here, which I could have said anything he wants. Say, well, why don't you give me something that ranges from orange to yellow? I could have taken my ramp, making it those two colors, and have it interpolate between the two based on the temperature of these particles, which are asking from the container. So you can kind of hope, hopefully if you watch it again, I don't know, you will kind of see what I mean. So if the particle carries an RGB pp that ranges between those two colors, okay, he can use that RGB as the color of the light, for example. That's how we transferred the fluid simulation that was inside the skin of this character as light, okay, as light for scattering purposes through the skin of the object, of the person, of the character in this case. So let's see. Let me go back to the classroom, and how you guys feeling? All right, I don't see any comments. So why don't you guys tell me if you have any questions about what I'm doing today. So all of you guys, if you don't mind, just even if you don't have questions, just tell me no, so I know that it's cross-eyed. No, it's not that bad. It's very quick. It's just, honestly, the only you can see is only 3 lines of code, so that's not too bad. And what I like about it, I'm still waiting for Darius and Dave and Ingyan and Keith. If you tell me, if you have no questions, even though, just tell me so I can move on. Okay, I don't want to leave anybody behind, so please just type something. For you, Claude, you can ask other things as well. So that's what it could get interesting. You could ask for the density, for example, of the container, and use that, okay, for example, to emit particles in areas of high density or something like that. So as the fluid, don't think in terms of fire anymore. Think in terms of a waterfall, for example. Okay, so you do something with fluids, for example, and then as the fluid container loses density, then you could emit other particle systems, for example. I don't know, or do something else. So by querying fluid attributes, you can use them as per particle attribute for anything, for emission of other things, for goal weight or goal per particle as well. I don't know, to do crazy stuff. You remember in the movie Tron? There is a scene where Flynn, the new Tron, not the old Tron, the new one. When the son comes in to meet his father again, he's inside the grid and he's with that girl they arrive in his apartment, and he has, being inside the grid and all, he has a fireplace on one side, and the fire moves just like fire, but it's rendered as little cubes, almost like it's very geometrical, almost like a computer thought of a fire, and that's a way, for example, to do it, right? With this, you do a fluid sim of fire, you add vector points through it, you probably instance some sort of geometry, okay, into those points. Those points are moving because of the fire motion. They have instance geometry to make them look very geometrical. I could probably look online and find the image that I'm talking about. And then you can make those cubes change color. That was in shades of blue, I think, because everything in Tron was like between white and blue kind of look. So that that geometry of the fire was actually changing color. It almost felt like fire, but it was mapped to different colors. So that's why you will use a technique like this, for example. So you do your physically fire, your physical, 3D container, you do your fire like anything. Don't render that, but use that information to pass it on to something a bit more surreal, right? Seems like Dave and Keith are, I think all of you, probably, most of you, will be a little bit confused out of this. I just want to change the pace a little. I wanted to challenge you a little bit more this week. I think I've been very flexible so far. I don't know, everything has been manageable, but I wanted to give you something you're like, oh, scratch your head a little bit for a day. So because the next thing we're gonna do is cloth, and it's quite boring. So at least I'll give you this one to remember how good particles are. Perfect. So let me see if I can find that image here quickly. But keep thinking of something. If you think of any questions or you want me to repeat something, we have a few minutes, so I would gladly do it. In the meantime, let me see if I can find. I think it's called Tron Legacy or something like that. Let's see if that gives me something. Okay, so maybe we get lucky because there is one specific shot. If not, I even think I have the movie in my iTunes. Let's see now. But well, I don't see it. But in this apartment right here, okay, on this side here, keep an eye. If you have the movie, keep an eye on it, watch it. There's a fireplace. That's the one I'm talking about. So it moves like fire, and it changes color from shades of blue to white as fire will change temperature. And the way to do it will be with a technique like this. So I wish I had the clip. All right, so everybody's clear. No questions. You're gonna rewatch this. I'm gonna publish it tonight or tomorrow, so you can get it again. But if we're ready, if everybody's happy, then we'll move on. Perfect. So next week we're gonna start with nCloth, and that's how we finish the course. So 3 weeks of nCloth, and we're done. So perfect. So everybody's happy. I'm happy too. So I'm gonna stop the recording. So I'm gonna stop sharing. Thank you. I'll see you next week.